All right, welcome to Darker Days Radio episode number 73. That's right, we are back and we are bad. Isn't that right, Chig?
We are both bad and also back. That is correct.
Yep. So I'm, of course, one of your hosts, Mike, and as you just heard, Chig is here with me. How's it going, Chig?
It's going great, Mike. How about you?
You know, a lot of things have happened since I've last been here on the show. Moved to a new apartment, went across the city. My Shadowrun game is it's gone and done, but D&D 5th edition is still going on.
Yeah, I haven't played any 5th edition outside of a Gen Con setting, but just not what my group is into.
Understood.
But I hear good
Understood.
things.
Yeah, it's great. And Chig, what is your group into these days?
We have recently started another Torg campaign since they are going to be kickstarting the new version of that sometime in the next couple of months.
So you're playing it before it gets kickstarted?
We're
just trying to
playing the original from West End Games. Torg.
That's right.
Yes.
It's a legendary game system.
It's really good.
Actually, Mark, executive producer of this show, Mark Hope, huge fan of Torg.
Hi, Mark.
Yeah, wherever he is out there. Anyway, so yeah, we're Darker Days Radio, and today we're going to be talking about the classic One World of Darkness source book, Charnel Houses of Europe, the Shoah. It's going to be quite a ride. Going to be talking about some, pretty deep, dark things. But we're going to do it. We're going to do it, Chig. And
we were asked, and we will come through on that.
Indeed, indeed. But enough with introductions. Let's talk about White Wolf news just a little bit. Okay, so it's been a while since we've last been here talking about some of the newest World of Darkness stuff going on. So, of course, the Grand Masquerade happened, and we're going to put a link in the show notes to the keynote speech and also the Q&A. A lot of stuff was discussed in those. I don't really want to go through it too much and detract from our main topic here on this episode. But the big announcements are, of course, that we're going to get Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition, which is going to be internally developed by the new White Wolf in Sweden. And they're also brainstorming a new edition of Werewolf. So that's the big stuff going on.
Yeah, I'm not sure I care for the 5th edition branding, because there was first, there was second, there was revised, which would make it 3, and then 5th edition.
Well, you got the 20th anniversary. I think they did it because Eddie Webb kept talking about how, well, he was with CCP and Onyx Path going to do Vampire 4th edition, and of course with the changeover, that got axed. So I think just to avoid confusion, they wanted to go with Vampire 5th edition. So the 4th edition never came out, and don't look for it. And also, they seem really psyched about having the whole VV logo, which looks like, two things.
They are super, super excited about that.
Yeah. But anyway, of course, our friends over at Onyx Path are doing some great stuff. And, we haven't been on for a little while, and a lot of things have come out. We got some new Dark Ages material, which is incoming. It's finishing up development right now, getting some great art direction. For Chronicles of Darkness, we have Promethean 2nd edition, which is off the hook. It just makes the game so much more playable, and in addition to that, just kind of expands the role of the Prometheans and the different story possibilities, while still retaining that sort of isolation that made the original version of it so interesting. So definitely good stuff. And of course, Mage the Awakening 2nd edition has dropped since we last talked, so that's really cool. And Chig, I know that you are tenuously excited about the Scion 2nd edition Kickstarter. It looks really good. I know Matt, friend of the show and Werewolf correspondent, is really excited about it. He's gone in full hog on the Kickstarter. And Chig, you've got your own opinions.
I'm kind of teetering on the edge there. It looks like it could be so good. The same, well, not the same, but close enough for government work system that makes, your dexterity the only stat that you need system.
Yeah, dexterity is still the god stat of pretty much like
So
any
I
RPG
just
ever. Yeah, but the interesting thing about the new story path system, I think is the name of it. Correct me if I'm wrong, Chig.
I believe so.
Is
That
that
sounds correct to me.
yeah? So the way that it's kind of gone beyond the original storyteller system is that now you have particular thresholds you need to meet. Specifically, so like in older Scion and Aberrant, and also Exalted, there were a lot of like auto successes. You when you rolled your dice, you just added in like a straight like +3 number of successes based on some power you had. And that made
Hmm.
things a little silly, especially with Exalted's perfect defense, where if you got equal successes for offense and equal for defense, defense always won. That made things pretty tough. Now you need to get a certain number of successes to even apply those like auto hits, which means that there's still a chance that you know a godly being could fail.
which
It's not
is
very
which is
likely.
which is good. I will grant you, but you never see Hercules try to lift up, a Buick and then say, "Oh, my back."
That's true, but I mean, I'm sure there's ways to for non-dramatic actions, not worry about it. But there should always be that small chance of failure, which is kind of what I think they're going for with it.
This is
But
true.
yeah, maybe when that's closer to coming out, we can discuss it here on the show and dip into the analysis of the system a little bit further, because I think it definitely has some value and improvements.
Oh, absolutely. Just the changing of the core pantheons alone
Oh yeah,
has
yeah,
me kind of
certainly.
interested.
And other cool news, actually, Eddie Webb and Richard Dansky, who we're going to be talking about a little bit here on this episode, are working on World of Darkness audio adventures for the new company Earplay. It's pretty cool. It's kind of like a choose your own adventure, but there's audio involved, there's sounds, just kind of makes it a bit more involved and interactive, since you can even speak your actions, and the app will pick it up. So it's pretty cool. And actually, we're alpha testing an Orpheus story at the Grand Masquerade. So that's pretty neat.
Yeah, it sounds like it could be interesting. I mean, if it's done right. Well, I'm not sure. I'm less on the fence about this and more on the not interested on this
Well, I mean,
than I was about Scion. That's just
it,
me.
it's an interesting kind of like experiment and technology. So I'd be happy to just check it out. I don't know if I'm gonna have time for it. I mean, you can't really be sitting on the train talking to your story phone that much. Maybe you could. I don't know. But anyway, suffice it to say, we've had some great stuff going on here with Darker Days Radio itself. Our faithful co-host Chris went over to Belfast last weekend to record some great wargaming content with the Beasts of War website. We'll give a link to that in the show notes, but I think some pretty cool stuff is coming along over there, and you never know, we might help out Beasts of War a little bit with some of their role-playing game content, which would definitely be super rad.
Absolutely.
Yep, and we've also got our sister show, Midnight Express. They recently did a great episode on the Skinner with our pal and also fellow co-host Peter Marshall. Although he doesn't really get on the show that much, we need to amend that soon. And yeah, they're talking about the Werewolf 20th SAS adventure, The Skinner, talking about Sam Haight a little bit.
Great episode. I listened to it on an airplane flying home from I don't know where I was, but it was a great episode. If you haven't
Absolutely.
listened to it, you should download that and listen to it.
Yeah, definitely. Midnight Express is the best, along with the other Worlds of Darkness show. They're also great. Shout Out Sworn Radio Hour. They just recorded their 7th episode last night, and it should hit the airwaves soon. So really excited to see those guys chugging along and making some great content.
I should really download their 6th episode and listen to it. I'm
Yeah,
a little
totally.
behind.
Totally. So with that, Chig, I think it's time to strap in for one hell of a ride, because we're going to go to the One World of Darkness and talk about Charnel Houses of Europe, the
I'll
Shoah.
see you there. Ooh.
So, Charnel Houses of Europe, the Shoah, is billed as a Black Dog source book on the Holocaust for Wraith the Oblivion. It's probably one of the most ambitious projects that White Wolf, in its original incarnation, ever undertook. And we were asked to do this episode by listener David Mata. I don't really want to share all the details of his personal story, but suffice it to say, his family suffered greatly at the hands of Franco-fascists and nationalist Spain during the time of World War II. So he asked us to discuss the closest White Wolf book that they ever released to kind of his own family experiences, and sort of reflect on the current rise of ultranationalism in Europe that's going on at this time. So it's a hefty task, but I think we're up to it. And let's just kind of jump into some of the background. I think Chig, talking about the Shoah itself.
Okie doke. Let's dive right into this.
Yeah. So before the Shoah came out, Chig, you were on the internet at the time, and you might remember that it was filled with consternation.
Yeah, I'm an old man, and I've been here for a while. Yeah, it was a Black Dog book, and they announced that it was going to be a Black Dog book, and for the more mature game line, which at the time, Black Dog books were mostly about gore and just gross, rapey, sexual kind of stuff. But that would not be the case with this book.
Certainly not, but you can kind of understand that, some of the fans of World of Darkness books at the time, they're a little cautious because, we had Montreal by Night, which is, it's I don't know if I want to call it a good book, but there is usable content in there. You've got Freak Legion, which I don't want to say is a good book, definitely, but there is some hilarious stuff in there. And then, of course, Destiny's Price, which we've previously covered on the show. And yeah, these were all pretty over the top. There was a lot of graphic violence, language, nudity. And, despite other books like The Last Supper, for the Giovanni Chronicles, and also, I think at this time, Spectres was also out for Wraith. Despite those books, there was kind of a reputation that the Black Dog books were kind of going there to these extreme things just because they could.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So then White Wolf announced that they're going to be discussing one of the worst atrocities in human history. And, when Charnel Houses of Europe, the Shoah, finally got into the hands of readers, it really created this unified dialogue amongst World of Darkness fans. And, for the first time, it really took a critical look at the Second World War's place in the World of Darkness itself. So, I mean, amongst Americans and Europeans, World War II is this, kind of unfortunately very popular topic. War movies are a huge industry. Schools focus entire courses on the war, and military history nerds have like their own cults of personality around particular generals. It's really weird. And Chig, even the History Channel is pretty much funded by Pawn Stars and Hitler documentaries at this point. Am I right?
I think they also have some Bigfoot stuff on there, but yeah, beyond that.
Yeah, definitely they do. And also aliens. That always comes up. Yeah, but
Could always be aliens.
Yeah, in the context of the old World of Darkness, World War II is featured notably in the background. There's caitiff vampires began appearing en masse following Hiroshima and Nagasaki and the atomic bombs that were dropped there. The Nazi Party itself erodes the legitimacy of the Geta Fenris tribe in Werewolf the Apocalypse. And then, of course, writers of Mage can't really seem to agree with who supported who amongst the Axis and the Allies. And there's numerous references to each. And, finally, Charon of Stygia in Wraith the Oblivion sacrificed himself to shield the Shadowlands from essentially the fallout of the Second World War.
Well, specifically the fallout of the ending of the Pacific War.
Yep.
So the literal fallout.
Yes. So, despite all this, it's really all just some minor background material, these kind of singular plot points. And with the exception of the pretty awful Berlin by Night, which we may have to redeem someday, there hasn't been a detailed look at the immediate effects of World War II in the game. And, nations were toppled, 70 million people died. It's a huge event in the history of the world.
It is a huge
And
event, but as you say, it is a historic event.
mhm,
And if we all, are paying attention, this is an original World of Darkness book, and that is very America centric,
yep.
and it is very late '90s centric. It doesn't deal a lot with anything that happened, especially overseas, which was where the majority of World War II took place, and it doesn't deal very well with anything outside of the immediate scope of your individual chronicle, except for in the historic World of Darkness lines, like the Dark Ages lines.
Hmm.
So it makes sense that it was all kept as background material.
And yet, Richard
And
Dansky
yet,
decided to discuss a small but, horrifically tragic number of these people that died, and decided to explore the Holocaust itself. So, yeah, Charnel Houses of Europe was written by Richard Dansky. He was a developer. He was on our show way back in Darker Days Radio, episode number 20, classic episode.
friend of the show, Rich Tansky.
Indeed, I met him in real life, in fact, and told him it was one of my favorite episodes. And I wasn't even a host then; I was just a listener. And it was also written by Jonathan Black, who I don't think has written any other World of Darkness books. I did a quick search, and I believe this was his only one. And of course, it was also written by Robert Hatch, notable as the third Vampire the Masquerade developer, and also the developer of World of Darkness Gypsies. But more on that later.
Oh, God.
Yeah. So, when setting out to write Charnel Houses, Rich made a very wise decision up front. He said and declared that the Holocaust was caused by humans, real people. Everything that occurred in the real world precipitated exactly the same in the World of Darkness. There was no vampires involved. There was no mages. It was all just people. And this book would be an exploration of the dead and how their ghosts haunt our world, so that we, as the living, can have catharsis to explore and discuss this entire situation. And it's a good book. It's going to come up there right front.
It is a very good book, but it is not an easy book to read.
No, I might have texted.
You should not read it alone at night, Mike.
Yeah, I might have texted Chig last night, kind of breaking down a little bit, even though I told him I didn't break. I didn't break, Chig. But yeah, so just looking at the book itself, kind of the structure, the book begins with this, obligatory fiction and forward by Janet Berliner, stressing the necessity to not only remember, but discuss. And it shows quite well why Rich went on this crusade to create a game to explore and reflect on, well, untold suffering. And the source book itself is broken into 5 chapters. So we have the first chapter, which is just kind of the background, discussing what happened in the real world, going over the history. And then, in addition to that, the aftermath of this that took place in the Shadowlands. And then finally, there's 4 chapters exploring specific necropoli that exist in the modern setting of the World of Darkness. And the real world history is well written, discussing the slow build of race violence against Jews and Romani, leading to the acceleration towards genocide and murder of many ethnicities, political opponents, and supposed undesirables.
Yeah, so here's a little bit of real world trivia that I learned very recently. When they were filming Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory in Germany in 1970, they had trouble finding enough little people to play the Oompa Loompas, as so many of them had been just killed in the Holocaust.
Yep, that's quite the fun fact.
That is definitely a fact.
Yeah. So yeah, the history in here is functional, but it's not really anything you're not going to find in a real history book. And interspersed between the historic facts are some sidebars discussing how denizens of the World of Darkness reacted to what was going on. And these are mostly not great.
No, they are mostly hot garbage, to be honest.
Yeah.
My favorite was the little sidebar about, oh hey, they had werewolves and vampires in the concentration camps too. BT dubs. They were
Yeah,
also experimented on.
wasn't great. Wasn't. I
Not
would
sure
have.
what, if anything, that adds.
It added nothing. I would have preferred if they just weren't there, because they kind of distract from the overall real world historic process. And I'm glad that they kept it separate, at least by sidebars. So the next time
Yes.
you read through, you can simply ignore it. Um, but it doesn't add much to the context um, of this source book itself, nor really to the World of Darkness in general. But it's very easy to kind of set that aside and ignore it overall. But the book then proceeds to the aftermath of the Holocaust in the Shadowlands. And essentially, the concentration camps in Europe have, in the Shadowlands themselves, become these horrific spawning grounds of enfants. Thousands appear per day in these concentrated areas, and these horrific Niles erupt from the bleak Shadowlands earth, and specters run rampant, killing and corrupting the unchecked millions that are now entering from these locations. And the hierarchy, of course, completely botches their response to the situation. From their high towers in Stygia, the Death Lords just push the crisis off on local Shadowlands Acherons, forcing them to make these partition territories to hold the new wraiths. So, of course, now they've put the Shoah wraiths into their own prisons and ghettoized areas once again. Not great. Not great.
Not the finest reaction.
No, certainly not. And from here, the book kind of takes a bit of a leap. With Charon gone, the Shadowlands are kind of in chaos, dealing with the millions of new wraiths entering the dark kingdom of Iron from World War II itself. And thousands of these Shoah wraiths, who were victims of the Holocaust, travel to Stygia to pretty much put the Death Lords on full blast. And with the support of the ferrymen, these unfortunate wraiths are given full autonomy, allowed to find their fellow survivors and create new necropoli at the sites of their deaths. And it's, as I mentioned, a bit of a leap. I'm not a huge fan of this plot, but I can appreciate how it sets up a lot of the later content in the book. There may have been some better ways to do it, and it kind of paints Stygian society and the Holocaust victims themselves in very, very broad strokes. And actually, an interesting thing I noticed reading through this again was that the word Jew, or mention of Jewish faith or people, is never actually used in this section. So maybe the intent could have been the broad strokes being used to give the different victims equal treatment, which is certainly something I could appreciate.
Absolutely, though they do refer to all of the Holocaust wraiths as Dybbuk, which is, of course,
Yes,
a Jewish term.
it is a Hebrew
So
word, indeed. Or no, it's Yiddish, isn't it?
I believe it's Hebrew.
Okay, my bad. Yeah. So, Chig, you had some comments on this, of course.
Yeah. So when they march on the back up to Charon's tower in the capital city or whatever, they're the Army of Fire, as they're called, goes up there to air their grievances. And they agree to something called the Covenant of Millions, which is, as Mike said earlier, where they are basically given the horrible, horrible lands in what amounts to hell here in Stygia, that are right next door to super duper mega hell.
Yep.
And they just say, okay, yeah, we'll do that. We'll go back and hang out at the site where the worst atrocities man has ever committed were committed on us. And that sounds like a great deal for us. Aside from hand wave fiat, why did this sound like a good idea to anybody?
Well, certainly within the context of Wraith, a lot of their late in life fetters are going to be near or at these locations, particular buildings that still exist or items that have been buried under the soil. And they're going to want to be close to these. So certainly I could see some of these Shoah wraiths wanting to for their own survival, remain at these locations. And the book also does discuss that wraiths are able to retrieve pathos from the emotions of people in the Skinlands, and a lot of these locations are now museums or monuments, memorials, and there is a lot of emotion going through those are the quick that visit these locations. So there is a resource to be gained there. However, on the flip side, there are definitely some Shoah that have their fetters in other locations, and they might return to Poland or Belarus, where they originated, to be near those. And the book doesn't really discuss them that much, but it's not difficult to also consider the fact that there may be some far-roaming Shoah wraiths as well.
So you have 2 points. One is they don't want to leave because they want to make sure that their fetters are protected. Okay, that's covered by point 2. These are now historical, museums and world heritage site places. So they're not going to be, they're not going to, bulldoze these locations and put up a mini mall.
Sure. I think we're about to actually kind of jump into some of these locations, and just one of the things that commonly happens is that the Shoah wraiths tend to wall off their necropoli, and frequently they also have these Niles, these links to the Tempest below.
Super hell.
Yeah, super hell, where the specters are coming from. And it would probably make more sense if they just made the walls a little bit smaller and just put them around the Nile itself to
move those in a little bit, cover that up,
rather than sleeping right next to them.
Put some paint on top of it and just ignore it. It'll take care of itself.
That said, we're using logic here, and that might not always support the story and imagery that's trying to be achieved here.
I know.
So let's get on to the main event here, the 4 necropoli. And this, I said these are great. I'll say it again that they're great. This is really what you're coming to the book for. They're very interesting to read about, and just have a very strong resonance, and are probably the most useful to people that would use Charnel houses in a game itself.
Absolutely. These are all very interesting, great locations. In the end, this is a location book. And these are all very, very interesting, but man, again, I would not want to live here.
No, certainly not. Actually, here's an idea, kind of going on that tangent we just had. It would make sense that there would be a number of wraith circles that would be focused on trying to move fetters and anything they could out of these locations, moving them in the real world through influence, possession, what have you, someplace else, so that's the
anywhere else.
Shoah wraiths could survive in more safety and in a more peaceful situation. But anyway, that's not what this book is about. This book is
really good chronicle.
Yeah, it could certainly. This book goes through a couple different locations. So the first one is the Theresienstadt ghetto, which was a specifically Jewish ideal community set up by the Nazi Party. And the ghetto was in an old Austrian fort, which was meant for about 5,000 people max, and 30,000 were crammed in it. They were actually Nazis were kind of using this as like this transportation point, sending them from the community to other locations, the death camps themselves. And interestingly enough, the Nazis kept saying, "Oh, this is the ideal community," to try to like fool people into showing up here. When the Red Cross showed up and on an international mission to check on the treatment of specifically Jewish people, the Nazis just spruced it up and tricked the Red Cross into thinking it was a nice place.
Actual real world occurrences, yes.
Yep, yep, certainly. So because of that, it makes this a very interesting and unfortunate location to explore in your World of Darkness games. And yeah, in the Shadowlands, this is probably the most bearable of all the necropoli presented here. So TLDR, it's going to get worse, guys. Um, and that says
It's all
something.
downhill from here.
It says something when this place literally has bleeding walls, which the wraiths live inside. But it does have a safe and fairly stable government with a lot of depressed wraiths looking for transcendence.
Yeah, this is, like you said, the nicest of the four necropoli presented. It's still not good. It is very much not
Nope.
good, and even even for the best of the four, it still has that gateway to super hell right there in the middle of it,
Mm-hmm.
and there are crazy specters wandering around just eating people.
Yep, pretty much. It's
But I guess it's better than going to the town. I'm not sure. I don't really understand and just leave. But that's just that would not make a very good story. That is why they will not just leave.
indeed, indeed. And the next one they discuss is the Warsaw Ghetto. So you've probably heard the story. The Jews of Warsaw and central Poland were all trucked into this 100 square block cordoned off area of Warsaw to live in pretty much horrific squalor. And once the Nazi party started to ship people to the death camps, taking them out of here, the underground Jewish resistance rose up to fight back. And as a result, the entire ghetto, all of the buildings were completely razed. Everything was collapsed and on the ground by the end of it.
Burnt down.
Indeed. And because of this methodical razing that was done, the entire ghetto now exists again in the Shadowlands. And it's kind of it's a very interesting setup. It's this walled fortress within the Warsaw necropolis. It's densely populated with wraiths, and outsiders think it's a huge threat. And one of the interesting things they decided to do in this section was that the necropolis is filled with these wraiths that are historic people. And I don't know about you, Chig, but in vampire and mage source books, I'm usually not a fan of this. I don't need to hear that Louis Pasteur is a vampire, but I'm a little almost ambivalent towards this approach because using the assumptions that they have of the of pretty much every single person killed horribly in this tragedy became a wraith. Some of them became specters. Others went to oblivion immediately. Some transcended it, of course, but many are still remaining in the Shadowlands. Real people would be here. Notably, they're talking about the leader of the Jewish resistance here, and that's one of the kind of assumptions they have for this setting itself of the Warsaw Ghetto necropolis. Is that the resistance is still basically in charge, which is kind of interesting.
Well, I mean, who else would be in charge? I mean,
that's logical as well.
Yeah,
Clearly,
they were in charge when everything, got burned down, and they all showed
Yep.
up at the same time. So, yeah, they're going to still be in charge.
Certainly.
But I'm right there with you on. Normally, yes, I do not care that Rasputin was a Nosferatu, Black Spiral Dancer, Euthanatos, Monkey God. I don't care. I don't want to hear about any of that garbage.
Mhm.
But yeah, it does make sense in this particular setting that they would use real people, although it's a little on the disrespectful side. But at the same time, yeah, like you said, it makes sense that they would use actual historic people, especially given the fact that they are 100% historic at this time. They are no longer among the living, so their stories in the real world are over. So I guess I kind of get where they're coming from there, but again, it's not really the most respectful treatment.
Yeah, I definitely see that, Chig. Maybe the best thing to do is that you can include them in the explanation of the setting, but it might not be good to portray them in your game.
Yeah, and don't give them stat write-ups.
Oh, they definitely did that in this book.
They definitely did that a couple times.
Whoops. Yeah. So, just kind of a quick explanation of the Shadowlands setup of the Warsaw Ghetto is that the Resistance is now in charge, and it's pretty militaristic. I almost say materialistic, which it is as well. There's a lot of tension between them in their safe walls and the Polish wraiths on the outside. And of all the necropoli, this is actually certainly the easiest one to come up with conflicts and plot ideas for. You know, kidnappings between Warsaw and the ghetto for soul forging purposes, Polish wraiths maybe seeking shelter from a maelstrom inside the thick walls of the ghetto itself. There's a lot of options for internal and external conflict. The only problem is that you pretty much have to set this or have your game set in Warsaw.
Yeah, and that's often a an issue with setting books.
Mm. Yeah, exactly. Maybe your characters might end up there, but it's a bit of a challenge. So from there, we go to the third location, which is Babi Yar, and it's actually just a ravine outside of Kiev, where more than 100,000 people were executed by the SS. This is actually the first necropolis that features non-Jewish victims prominently, with many Ukrainian and Russian dissidents being executed here. And side note, the author did not seem to know that Ukrainians aren't Russians. He just uses the terms interchangeably. Whoops. But that's fine.
They're
I'll forgive
basically
him.
the same place, right?
I mean, common history, fairly similar, but another fun historic fact, just to throw in here, Ukrainians to this day don't really like talking about Babi Yar. It's kind of in a lot of ways a national embarrassment. And recently there was a new highway built right near the area, and you know the embankment itself, and cars traveling at 60 miles per hour or 75 kilometers per hour really just discourage people from visiting the site. Yeah, did you like that quick conversion there?
I did. Did you do that math in your head? That was
Yeah, but
impressive.
I definitely underestimated it. It's probably more like 5 kilometers per hour. But anyway, um, yeah. So as you would expect, people were dying here en masse, which in the Shadowlands created a large Nile, huge rupture in the Shadowlands down to the Tempest itself. And luckily, some Soviet Red Army wraiths showed up and got the situation under control. And they've been there working with the Holocaust victims ever since to mend the Nile. 105 kilometers per hour? Man.
105 kph, yeah. You said 65, right?
I said
You
75?
said 65 miles.
Yeah,
Per
60
hour.
miles per hour. And I was
105
like, anyway, this isn't good radio, but
This is great radio. Math is fun.
it is fun. It is good.
But yes, the Nile that was created,
Yep.
and they are
I mean,
working on fixing that for the past 50 years
something like that. Yeah.
at the time of writing.
Constantly, never taking a break.
Seems like a good use of your time, I suppose.
Yeah, maybe, as you were saying here in the show notes, Chig, maybe they should just move on at this point.
Just saying.
Babi Yar is a little underwhelming, I guess, but it's also fairly modular. You can easily use this concept in any Wraith game outside of this setting focused on the Shoah. The idea of a walled sanctuary sitting on a Nile is kind of evocative and could really be located anywhere. So
Anywhere that there was a horrific
atrocity.
mass killing, yes.
Yep.
Which sadly is a lot of places.
Yeah. And finally, we get to the final location, which is Auschwitz and the Birkenau camp itself.
Yeah. This setting
So-
specifically is what you were reading last night, and I told you to stop and take a break, and you said no.
Yeah, I probably should have.
Mm.
This is the worst of the death camps. You're probably familiar with the history, the emaciation of the prisoners and the hard labor, beatings, shootings, and the Zyklon B and gas chambers, and really just this historic insight into the cold and carelessness of the human race, the depths of depravity. And Rob Hatch researched this topic thoroughly. He thought hard about how the place and its victims would manifest themselves in the Shadowlands. And he succeeded. And maybe he even redeemed himself for World of Darkness gypsies. No, I'm just kidding. He totally didn't. He keeps calling the Romani gypsies throughout this entire thing. That's not their name, dude. Okay? Stop it. That's not the name of their ethnic group. They're called the Romani. Maybe we should go back to...
even...
Oh, yeah. The sidebar?
There's even a sidebar about the gypsy camp. And, yeah. I mean, it's... One, it's an offensive term. Two, the sidebar is only there to say, oh, hey, yeah, you know how we've said in other books about how those gypsy guys, they have such great ties with a couple of vampire clans. They didn't do anything to help. They all died in this camp anyway. Like, why is this sidebar here? Mm-hmm. What does this add?
Nothing.
Ugh.
Yeah, it was not great. Super not great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was also, the 1990s were slightly different, especially here in the United States. Like, people didn't really know much about the Romani people overall, but today in our more globalized society, probably should stop using that word and just call them Romani.
Yes, I would like to think that were this book written today, it would not have this sidebar or this term being used constantly.
Certainly. Yeah, they never use Romani, I don't think, ever in this book.
I did not see the
G word. Always the G word. Anyway, let's get back on topic here. The theme of this section is, as in life, so too in death. And the Wraith victims in Auschwitz have retained their social order from the 1940s concentration camp unto death, creating this violent, anarchic state, particularly with the absence of the totalitarianism of their Nazi overlords. And Jewish triangles, because they're not using circles here, using triangles.
They're taking it back.
That's right. Are opposed by, say, communist ones. Criminal triangles fight the Romani. And the Jehovah's Witnesses are literally the nicest people in the camp, which I thought was a really interesting touch.
Yeah,
they help people, many of them become partners and help relieve angst and thorns from the Wraiths in the camp.
They are nice folk.
Yep. And it's otherwise pretty much madness here. Wraiths go missing all the time, and you don't know if it was a political opponent that offed them or dragged them to the Soul Forge, or if it was some Russian specter that came out of the darkness and snatched them. Oh, and of course, all the Russian POWs became specters, just cause.
Yeah, was there any explanation on that?
There was. So historically, many Russian POWs were sent on a death march towards Auschwitz and Birkenau. And those that arrived at Birkenau were then immediately forced to begin hard labor. They hadn't really gotten any food. They just had to scavenge for things in the fields as they walked. And all of them died very fast. And they said that when they reached the Shadowlands, they were just easily overcome by specters already there. Yeah, so it's
all a moot point because the Wraith community in the Shadowlands doesn't make a distinction between Wraith and Spectre. The book says so, which I'm not sure how that's going to work, but
certainly not in. The reason I think they said that was because this is such a vicious place that it's very difficult for some hierarchy official just walking by with his legionnaires to even tell the maddened specters apart from the angst-ridden members of the Auschwitz necropolis. And there's perhaps even specters just walking amongst the some of the ones that are more easily blend in, like doppelgangers, just walking amongst the general population of this place as well. Yeah, it's really dark.
It's not a good place.
It's not. It's really not. And why does no one leave, Chig? Why does no one leave? Because there's crazy specters crawling all over the place, and also there's barbed wire everywhere. You're almost trapped in a lot of ways, and it's very easy for a careless wraith to get entangled and destroyed.
Barbed wire, soul forged from dead Nazis,
Yeah.
which is
No,
kind of
no,
symbolic.
the barbed wire isn't soul forged from them. The dead Nazis get soul forged and other things. No, the barbed wire just keeps appearing. It's like kind of growing out of the ground. When they wake up each day, there's just more of it. And they try to use it for materials because it is ectoplasm itself. But yeah, it's one of the great mysteries of the place is where is the wire coming from?
Regardless, they have trains. It said so in chapter 1. It connects all the necropoli.
They did mention that.
They can
But
get on that train and they can go anywhere.
yeah, I mean, they do mention that all of the Shoah and the Contract of the Millions necropoli are interconnected by train tracks, but you're not going to go outside alone. Definitely, you're going to need to grab a group and travel in numbers for safety.
Sure, absolutely. I agree.
So, yeah, not only are the politics of Auschwitz vilely interesting, but so is the imagery. As we mentioned, it's called the Dark Kingdom of Wire, and it's this twisting maze of barbed wire and shoddy barracks, which are covered by this toxic semi-solid miasma. And this was an interesting touch. The ash-filled brook traveling or running near the camp will sometimes get out of its channel and grab you and pull you underwater.
Yeah, that was a. I'm not sure what was going on with that, where that idea came from, but that is just some fantastic imagery.
Indeed. It's a bleak place. Yes, it's interesting to read about in small doses, but I'm certainly not courageous enough to use this location in game. There's no relief to the stress in this location and the stress that it evokes. It just keeps getting worse in a lot of ways. And then the book just kind of ends. There's no denouement, no afterword.
There are two flaws because what every book about the Holocaust and specifically the section about concentration camps needs is a way to get your character just a few more build points for character generation.
Yeah, but those are brutal flaws. I don't think you'd want to take them ever. Like 4 points to lose 2 health boxes or corpus in the case of Wraith, and also have a bunch of drawbacks for gaining pathos. Not the best. Not the best in my opinion. Even the mechanical options in this book are not great. They definitely do not help.
It should not be there.
No, it probably shouldn't. Especially because
it's distasteful at best.
Indeed. Especially because at this point, really the book just ends and leaves you with really just time to reflect on the ghostly echoes of human depravity.
Yeah. There's nothing at the end. There's nothing.
There's no hope.
Stops.
It just stops. That's it. So Chig, would you play this game? Would you use this book? Does it pass the CHUP test for you?
I would absolutely never in a million years play a game in this setting. I don't think that I or any group that I have ever gamed with is mature enough to give it the respect that it deserves. So no, I would not play a game set in the charnel houses of Europe. How about you, Mike?
No. I mean, as I was reading through this, I was, of course, analyzing it for the gameability. And there definitely are. They didn't just make an art book. They certainly did think about how this could be used in a chronicle.
And there are some fantastic ideas in there. The Warsaw Ghetto that is like the ghetto itself is whole because it was all, the 100 square blocks were all just raised down. But then on the outside of that, there's this huge twisting, turning, nightmarish, dark reflection of what's inside of it.
Mm.
That's an amazing an image right there.
Yeah, certainly. But am I courageous enough to use it in a game? Probably not.
No.
But I think that the game and setting of Wraith is nothing if not enhanced by this book existing. It answers a lot of questions and just takes this really serious discussion of how real world atrocities may be reflected amongst the Shadowlands, and gives people an opportunity to just reflect, consider, and even explore what happened with some distance, rather than experiencing it in the context of a living, real world historic role playing game.
Absolutely. It is as we said at the beginning, it is a good book. It is
Yep.
one of, if not the best Wraith books, in my opinion. But I do not think that it is gameable.
Certainly, I am not
by
courageous
me.
enough at this time. So that is Charnel Houses of Europe, the Shoah. I don't know if we even answered any of David's questions or what he was really requesting with this, but that's the book, and that's kind of what we think about it. It really serves as a reminder and lesson about not being a terrible person and not allowing other people to be terrible, within the context of, being presented as a role playing supplement. But yeah, listen, Matt McFarland once told me, "We're all in this together," and he was right. So I don't really have anything else to say. We're Darker Days Radio. We're skipping the Secret Frequency. We're skipping Chronicles of Darkness this episode because we just unloaded some pretty heavy stuff right there. You can check us out, of course. Send us some requests for episodes over at darkerdaysradio@gmail.com, and also go over to our Facebook page. So we'll see you all next time with a much more full episode, a much more positive episode, hopefully.
I don't think it could get much less positive.
Yeah, but, well, I'm glad we did this, Chig.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, everyone. Good night.
See you next time, guys.